Elizabeth, great show. Have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday. You are looking live right now at Motown, where President Biden is set to speak at any moment, trying to build momentum and stop it all at once. We just heard from the president moments ago at a town hall in Northville, Michigan. It's the first time we've heard from the president after last night's press conference.
Which I really got clobbered by the press, as you recall. And they're good folks. They just thought I was naive, even though I've been around 270 years. We got to finish the job, and I promise you, I'm okay.
But that hasn't stopped the Democratic divide. When the president speaks live from Detroit, Michigan, we will take you there live. Also tonight, more Democrats are calling for him to step aside. Democratic donations reportedly put on pause, and the number 3 in D.C. reveals he has had a face-to-face with the president. Plus, what is Donald Trump going to do now?
I have some really good candidates, and, maybe leaning one way, and that changes sometimes.
Decision day nearing, and we are speaking with the Trump campaign before the big vice presidential pick. The race for the White House playing out live this hour right here on the Hill. And hello there. Good evening. Happy Friday. I'm Blake Berman. When you head into the Wolverine State, you're greeted with a sign that reads the slogan, Pure Michigan. Tonight, it is pure politics and continued pressure. Once President Biden takes to the stage in Detroit this hour, we will take you there live. It's his first comment since last night's press conference, in which he laid out why he's not dropping out of the race.
I'm not in this for my legacy. I'm in this to complete the job I started.
But that hasn't stopped Democrats from ditching his candidacy. Since then, 5 more Democratic lawmakers have called on the president to bow out. But now we are learning the news conference last night perhaps wasn't even the biggest moment of the evening. The top Democrat in the House, Hakeem Jeffries, now revealing that he met with the president face to face and then wrote to Democratic lawmakers this morning the following, saying, quote, "In my conversation with President Biden, I directly expressed the full breadth of insight, heartfelt perspectives, and conclusions about the path forward that the caucus has shared in our recent time together." Now, this is perhaps the third in a series of dominoes. Remember, it was Nancy Pelosi who earlier this week showed up on the president's favorite television show and essentially put a clock on him.
It's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short.
And then what happened hours later? George Clooney dropped his jarring New York Times op-ed calling on the president to leave the race. Former President Barack Obama and those in his circle have not batted down the reporting that the president knew it was coming and didn't try to stop it. And now Leader Jeffries with a public letter that did not include an explicit endorsement. We begin tonight here on the Hill with a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, a group that has yet to break from the president, in fact, standing behind him firmly. The Democratic Congresswoman Sydney Kamlager-Dove is a Democrat from Los Angeles, California. Congresswoman, thanks for being with us here on the Hill. You got that letter from Leader Jeffries earlier today, just like the rest of your colleagues. He didn't come out and fully say, "I back Joe Biden. You should too." Are you disappointed he didn't?
No, Leader Jeffries is doing exactly what he's supposed to do, which is listening to all members of the caucus and then expressing all of those concerns and hopes to the president. That is what he said he was going to do. He said he was going to conduct a listening session. You know, we are a vibrant and diverse caucus with a lot of perspectives, and he delivered all of that information to President Joe Biden.
Do you feel like there's a 1, 2, 3 here, Congresswoman, as I sort of laid out there, Nancy Pelosi going on television, seemingly an audience of one, trying to speak to the president? George Clooney then puts out that op-ed. The Obama world is not denying at all that he knew about it. And then the leader comes out today and writes that letter without the endorsement. Is Democratic leadership letting you down?
No, No, I stand full behind Leader Jeffries, and we'll be working with him to make sure he becomes Speaker Jeffries. You know, these folks are doing what they're supposed to do, right? What I will say is that President Joe Biden has said that he is running. He has also said that he has a vice presidential candidate named Kamala Harris. She has said that Joe Biden is running. So these folks also have the president's phone number. They can be communicating this to him if they want to. I recognize that there is some pressure for him to make a decision, but newsflash, he's already made the decision. And so now he needs to continue to talk to the American people.
So the Congressional Black Caucus is standing firmly behind this president. There's some reporting out there that maybe that could change. Is that how you see it, Congresswoman? Is there a potential break from the president that you know of that could potentially happen in the upcoming days, or is that door fully shut?
So the Congressional Black Caucus had a meeting with the president, you know, in the evening. I think it was after 8 o'clock. He was on there with us for quite some time, and he shared with us his record, which we already know. 15 million jobs, 800 manufacturing jobs, cutting child poverty in half, you know, working to address our climate crisis, you know, supporting the nomination of Ketanji Brown Jackson. The list goes on and on. Also making sure that we are shoring up these agencies that are doing things that help and protect the American people who deserve federal protection. So we are standing behind this man because he is the president, and he said he is running for re-election again.
But some Democrats aren't, as you obviously know. Jim Himes, for example, who is the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. That is a very big job. Here's what he said on the strongest candidate. He said, "I no longer believe that is Joe Biden, and I hope, as he is throughout a lifetime of public service, he will continue to put our nation first and, as he promised, make way for a new generation of leaders." I spoke on this show, Congresswoman, the other day with Adam Smith, who's the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, and here's what he told me.
I think right now, as I said, he's more than capable of doing the job. If you ask my honest opinion, given his health, do I think he can serve out the full 4 years? No, I really don't. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm not measuring that.
You know, these are two big leaders within the party, Congresswoman. The head of a committee that oversees our nation's military, the head of a committee that oversees our nation's intelligence, and they have basically said that the president needs to step aside. Let me leave you with this. Do you trust their judgment?
Well, I sit on Foreign Affairs. I am not a ranking member, but I, just last week had a meeting with almost a dozen ambassadors. Just came back from Brazil, where I met with a dozen countries and participated in some of the NATO events. And I can tell you that all of the countries that I met with are deeply concerned about a Trump presidency. They have talked about their hope that Joe Biden will win this election, and they have talked about what United States means for them and their region. China and Russia encroaching on democracies, working to replace democracies with rogue regimes, and the pressures that they are economically and politically putting on fragile democracies around the world. Joe Biden actually knows what NATO is, unlike Donald Trump, and he knows that there is a job to do. So coming from a member who sits on Foreign Affairs, I can tell you that the international community, which was also listening to the NATO press conference, deeply wants Joe Biden to remain and to run for presidency again.
All right, Congresswoman Kamala Gardov
and those
joining
folks
us.
that you talked about, they don't have, I was going to say, no, they don't have crystal balls. So the two folks that you mentioned do not have crystal balls.
We'll leave it there. The Congresswoman joining us from Los Angeles. Thank you, Congresswoman. Have a great weekend. We hope to have you back here on the Hill. Thank you.
Thanks.
You got it. All right. So clearly there you just heard from a Congresswoman who is firmly behind President Biden. But one of the big questions that has been going on in this town right now is there actually going to be a Democratic lawmaker who will talk to the president one-on-one and tell him, Mr. President, you got to go? We are now learning here at NewsNation that very conversation happened earlier today. Our Joe Khalil with some brand new reporting on what happened, Joe, with a call that seemingly went off the rails. What are you learning?
Yeah, so what we've learned today is that Congressman Mike Levin, the Democrat from the San Diego area, got a chance to actually tell President Biden directly on a Zoom call this morning that he does not believe President Biden is the right choice and he should step aside for the campaign. Now, that to our understanding, according to sources I've spoken to, may be the very first time that any member of Congress has actually said that directly to the president before making it public. Shortly after that moment, Mike Levin released his press release and made that news public for the world to share. But this was a call that was set up on Zoom between some members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus and the president. Most of the Hispanic caucus is still firmly behind the president, which is why many of them, I am told, were surprised by this. Some unnerved. They felt like it was not appropriate for Congressman Mike Levin to actually come forward in that setting and talk directly to the president. But I got to tell you also, I've heard there are other members who wanted to tell the president directly before they released press statements, and they were not allowed or not given the access to do so. So Mike Levin took that opportunity. I'm told that another member said it was like watching a car wreck, and they don't even remember what President Biden said back, because some were pretty shocked that this actually happened.
Joe Khalil live for us with that breaking news out of Washington. Joe K., thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Joining me here on the Hill today throughout the hour, at least until President Biden speaks, Julia Manchester, national political reporter for The Hill. Brad Howard is a former senior aide to House Democrats. Ford O'Connell is a Republican strategist. And Kelly Meyer, NewsNation Washington correspondent. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in on this Friday. My gosh, we made it to the end of the week, but here we are, and it feels like a Monday as we wind up the week. You, Brad, can back up what Joe K. said, that this call between the president and the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, is it right to say, went off the rails?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to a source that was on the call, and I think the important thing to point out here is this call was set up and controlled by the president's operation. And so it was with several members of the Hispanic caucus. And when they were about to end the call, and the president said, no, let me take some questions, because they had heard from two members, which I think were probably scripted, and they knew would be friendly comments. He wasn't supposed to open it up. He did. The first one to get recognized was Levin, and then he gave his comments. And apparently, even while the president was talking, the organizers ended the call mid-sentence.
So he didn't fully, as you understand it, get to say everything he wanted to say?
That's my understanding, is that the operation shut it down. And it left everyone, to his point about they don't really remember what he said, is because it was so bewildering that happened, and then the reaction. And I think this goes to a larger concern with House Democrats at the moment, that the White House and the Biden campaign are in crisis communications, disaster response mode, when they need to be in a healing mode right now. They need to be bringing these voices together, let them vent, let them know that they're being heard by the leader of their party, and that's what will really help heal the situation. They're not doing that yet, and it's starting to sense of a growing resentment among House members that don't feel like they're being heard.
So there's got to be folks at home watching us here on NewsNation or listening to us on SiriusXM and say, whatever, who cares about your feelings? But for lawmakers, tell me why this is a big deal.
Well, it's a big deal because a lot of these lawmakers are facing really uphill re-election fights. And you have the NRCC, the House Republican campaign arm, that is purposefully tying these these Democrats facing tough re-election to President Biden, saying, well, they didn't come out and say that they knew he was declining. They were part of this cover-up. That's the language they're using. And then also for Democrats who are coming out to say Biden should step down, the NRCC is calling it an election year stunt. So Democrats facing uphill re-election battles are really stuck between a rock and a hard place.
You know, Blake, and I was thinking of what we talked about yesterday a bit about how Aaron was saying he should go in person to the meeting yesterday with Senate Democrats instead of sending his aides. And in this, we know when we were talking to White House sources today, we heard the president was hunkered down internally making phone calls to these groups. We learned later it was the Congressional Hispanic Caucus and then the Congressional Asia Pacific American Caucus, as well as their political arms. So maybe they're wondering what they're asking, what Levin was asking, you know, are you okay? People want to know if you can do this job. Maybe if he showed them in person, that's what they want to see, and that's what he's saying he's doing on the campaign trail in Michigan and elsewhere.
So another story that caught my attention today, Ford, came from Axios, and here it is. It said, "Scoop: Biden campaign tries to rebound after bad bleeping weeks." Axios got a call, a recording of a call with the Biden campaign, which means someone leaked an audio recording of the Biden campaign to Axios. And Ford, I thought to myself when I saw this, that's got to show that there's some people on that campaign who are in deep despair at where things are right now. And I wonder, from your perspective as a Republican, when you see stuff like that going on, what do you make of it?
Democrats are in political purgatory. They don't know which way to go. Biden is largely seen as being incapable, and Harris is largely seen as being incompetent. You know, look, this cognitive decline thing, this has been going on for years, okay? Republicans pointed out it's been well known within the Democratic Party. If they thought Harris could have stepped up, she would have stepped up after the 2022 midterms. And frankly, if you're Donald Trump, you actually want to move the RNC convention back to the first week of August.
You want to punt
because
it,
exactly because
you want to punt it to November 4th, the day before the election.
But this bloodletting is delicious if you're a Republican, and there's no way as the red team we're going to step in and stop this.
If I could add one thing, I think what's missing in all this and what a lot of members are starting to demand is, okay, we understand you think you can do the job. But can you win us the presidency and the majorities in Congress? And they have yet to present data or a plan that makes that case. And I don't know if you can. I don't know if that data exists. So now we're emerging into a general election where our donors are mad.
Yep.
Our base is lost enthusiasm. Our swing voters are running away from the ticket. That is not a recipe for success. And I don't know if the train can be put back on the wheels at this point.
So as I said earlier this week, 1 for 3 gets you cut from the NBA. It gets you into the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame, right? Right now, you got to wonder if Democrats are just trying to go the MLB route and play 1 for 3 and hold one of those. All right, coming up here on the Hill, live pictures from Detroit. President Biden set to speak here later this hour. His first rally since that big solo press conference last night, as the calls for him, and you can hear them chanting, "We want Joe." But the calls for him to drop out of the race are growing within his own party. When the president hits the stage, we will take you to Michigan and the president live. You're watching The Hill. You're on NewsNation. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation as President Biden hits the road today. Again, live pictures there in Michigan. The pressure on him to withdraw is not letting up. A key constituency of support for the president up until this point is Democratic governors who met with him last week as the calls continued. Now, one of the governors that is in that session was Hawaii's Josh Green. And Governor Green joins us live here on The Hill. Governor, it is great to speak with you. Thanks for being with us here on The Hill. I want to start with this press conference last night from the president, because obviously you watched it, I watched it. There were all these questions about his age and about his travel. For those who don't know, you are a physician by trade. You were named twice the Physician of the Year in your home state, so you know a thing or two about this. I want to play for you some comments that the president said, and I'll ask your reaction on the other side.
Well, I just got to pace myself a little more. Pace myself. In the next debate, I'm not going to be traveling into 15 time zones a week before. Anyway, that's what it was about.
Says he's got to pace himself and won't be traveling a lot. Do you agree with that self-diagnosis?
That was definitely part of it. The president was exhausted. There's no question. He did not do well in that debate. None of us deny that, including the president and the first lady. But he did do much better when he was explaining foreign policy to the rest of the nation. He was quite sharp. Look, an 81-year-old gentleman is going to have moments where they skip a word, where they feel exhausted. That was the case when we had Ronald Reagan as president. And he went on to 2 terms that are viewed as very successful by many, particularly the Republican Party. So there are a lot of things that happen to an older person, and sometimes it's tough. And I will tell you, you're going to see bad days on the part of former President Trump also. These 2 gentlemen are old. Is that a surprise? No. It doesn't take a physician to tell you that. But what I can tell you is that cognitively, he is quite able to put major, complex policies together.
So here's what I can't wrap my head around, and maybe you can help me, Governor. And this has nothing to do with party identity, person, etc. But you heard the president there say that he basically needs to dial his travel back before a major event, in this case, the debate. How can the commander-in-chief, Governor, say, I can best represent this country, but if something big happens, I need to stop traveling? That's part of the job, is it not?
It is, but, the 90-minute interview process or debate process requires kind of rapid-fire, high-intensity challenges, and that's what he was experiencing. It is definitely something that he's trying to say deliberately. He doesn't want to spend energy if he's going to be judged in this political and partisan way. He also wants to be clear. He has a team around him that has done an extraordinary job, and frankly, that's really what the office of the presidency is. None of these guys go 24 hours a day. I was on call. I used to stay up for those kind of shifts.
Do you
and that
trust
was not
his
healthy.
team right now, Governor? Because it seems like he's fairly isolated and insulated.
His team is extraordinary. His team delivered 3.5 years of great work. And, I got to see him firsthand because we had the Maui wildfire just under a year ago. He walked the disaster zone with us. He greeted 300 people. This is very common. Teams, of course, they protect their principal. They do that for Mr. Trump. They do that for Biden. They've always done that for every president. Ronald Reagan in his last 2 years was completely surrounded by his inner circle and mostly Nancy Reagan. And everyone felt that he actually had severe decline then, but he was still our president. It's a complex question, but really it comes down to two people in this case, Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump. If you look under the hood of each, you see different things. Perhaps some fatigue on President Biden's part and a pathologic personality, unfortunately, on Mr. Trump's part. And that's really what is quite scary to people. That's why this election is extremely close still. A lot of the polls are within 2 percentage points, and women are nervous about Mr. Trump coming back into office. And I think personally that's why the polls are not wide like they might be after a bad debate.
Governor Green, I wish I had more time. We got to leave it there. The camera's starting to zoom out, so I believe we're going to be getting President Biden here at any moment. I'm sure you can understand. Thanks for joining us here on the Hill. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, I'll be here when you need me.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right. Live look at Detroit, Michigan. As we anticipate the president potentially here at any moment, let's get in a quick commercial break. More from the Hill and the panel on the other side. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation, and some big breaking news this hour. The criminal case against Alec Baldwin was just dismissed in the state of New Mexico. The actor, A-lister, was accused of involuntary manslaughter for the fatal shooting of a cinematographer while filming the Western movie Rust in 2021. Baldwin, as you might know, was facing up to 18 months in prison if jurors agreed he committed the felony. But as you can see there and here on NewsNation, the judge in that case has dismissed the case against Alec Baldwin. All right, live look as we continue to follow in Detroit, Michigan right now. President Biden taking to the stage at any moment now for a campaign rally, trying to save his bid for a second term. Once that happens, we will take you there live. But first, the Republican National Convention kicks off Monday in Milwaukee, and former President Donald Trump is preparing to announce his running mate. In an interview today, Trump says he's been impressed with the Republican senators J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, and Tim Scott, along with the governor from North Dakota, Doug Burgum.
I have some really, really good candidates, and, maybe leaning one way, and that changes sometimes. All of a sudden you see something that you like or you don't like, and you lean a little bit differently. But we have a very good bench.
But I want to show you something I noticed first thing this morning, something that is likely not coincidental. The Wall Street Journal editorial board running an op-ed explaining why, in its view, Governor Burgum is a better choice than Senators Vance and Rubio on the key issue of abortion. Then you scroll on over to the New York Post and its editorial board, and they too have an op-ed in which they go even further, declaring Burgum should be the pick, even saying they, quote unquote, implore Trump to pick Burgum. The possible link here? Both outlets owned by Rupert Murdoch. So, what comes next? Joining us now is Caroline Sunshine. She is the Deputy Director of Communications for the Trump campaign. Caroline, thanks for being with us here on the Hill. First time. It's been a long time since I spoke with you. Nice to see you. I'll say in advance if the president takes to the microphone, we'll jump in. Apologies in advance, but let's get to it. The expectation is that Donald Trump will announce on Monday. Is that what we can expect, the pick coming on Monday from Donald Trump?
Well, I don't know if you heard, but according to President Biden, President Trump is his vice president. Of course, at the big boy press conference yesterday, there was a big disaster as usual. But look, I would tell you, of course, that the only one who knows who and when President Trump is going to announce his vice president, of course, is President Trump himself. But could it be a clear point of contrast, as is everything these days, between our two campaigns? Our campaign is fielding endless speculation on who President Trump is going to select as his vice president, partly because President Trump, we couldn't be prouder to have him as our nominee. He's unified and inspired our party. You contrast that with, endless questions with the Biden campaign on if their VP nominee is going to replace their nominee. But look, whoever President Trump selects, selects. He understands how high the stakes are for this country, and he's going to pick someone who's going to be a great partner in supporting his mission to make America wealthy, safe, strong, and great again.
So let's go through these candidates, and I know I don't even know if the pick has been official from Donald Trump or not. But when you look at the four that he discussed today, it's 3 senators, 1 governor. Tim Scott, who is black, Marco Rubio, who is Hispanic. You've got men in the Senate, governors, minorities. I'm looking at that list there, Caroline. I don't see a woman on it. Why not?
Well, again, I would tell you, just because lists or names are out in the ether, it's the guessing game for everybody. The only person who knows who President Trump, again, is going to pick is President Trump himself. All of this is just speculation. And the good news about President Trump is when he has news to make, you usually certainly know it. But look, President Trump's focus is also on, as you mentioned, our convention this upcoming week, where we certainly expect him to make lots of news. And since you mentioned women, our convention is dedicated to the forgotten men and women of America. That is, of course, who President Trump has been fighting for since he came down that escalator in 2015. And he has a platform that reflects their wants and needs. And we're looking forward to bringing his winning message to the great people in Milwaukee.
So let me ask you about that Wall Street Journal op-ed from the editorial board there, because they note how J.D. Vance called for a minimum national standard as it relates to abortion. Marco Rubio sponsored a Senate bill to restrict abortions at 15 weeks. They note that Doug Burgum had argued for an abortion policy that is a question for the states. The Wall Street Journal essentially dividing the line there between Rubio and Vance and Burgum. Who got it right? Who got that policy right?
Well, I would tell you, like I said, it's President Trump who's the leader of the Republican Party, and whoever he selects as his vice president is going to serve at the pleasure of the president. They will serve in the executive office of the president, and it's President Trump who directs policy. And so whatever their past or current positions may have been, it's important to note that they will represent President Trump's position, which is that President Trump has said abortion is an issue to be left to the states. You saw that reflected in our new policy platform that just came out, which was celebrated, I might add, by over 7 national large pro-family and pro-life groups. And of course, we can't talk about being pro-life without talking about what's going on at the southern border. You know, if we talk about protecting life, which we do, we have to talk about protecting our women and our children. You've seen at the top of that party platform that the #1 priority is securing our border, and that's because you can't be pro-open border and also be pro-women and pro-children.
Speaking of women, is Melania Trump going to speak?
We are looking forward to the First Lady joining us in Milwaukee. What a tremendous First Lady she was. She brings grace and class to every event. I won't get ahead of the president or our campaign, but I'll tell you my favorite phrase, Blake, which is we're just going to have to see what happens, and you have plenty of reasons to tune in.
Caroline Sunshine with the Trump campaign. Caroline, nice to see you. Come on back here on the Hill. Thank you.
Thank you.
You got it. All right. I'm told, by the way, that President Biden's motorcade is at the event there, so we expect to hear from him any moment. Once that happens, we will take the speech live here on the Hill on NewsNation. Ford, though, you mentioned this. If it was up to Donald Trump, he would kick this RNC convention as far as possible. What about that list? Because we had talked about for months, you had talked about for months, how, you know what, maybe Donald Trump needs a woman to combat some of the issues that he has. We're listening to the idea of maybe Kamala Harris could potentially be at the top of the ticket. What do you make of that list?
Well, look, there's a wealth of talent to pick from, and it really doesn't matter which one he picks because it's not going to really disappoint. What
doesn't matter at all?
No, it doesn't, because here's what Donald Trump, here's the game plan. You want to break through the blue wall. However that happens, you've got to break through the blue wall. That means Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Let me say this about why I would speculate that the New York Post and the Wall Street Journal wrote what they wrote. See, on Wednesday night, there's somebody speaking right before the VP. Who might that be?
J.D. Vance.
No, Donald Trump Jr., who has been very vocal, how shall I say, in favor of J.D. Vance. Again, nobody knows who it is, but, other than Donald Trump. And we may not even know on Monday, even though the rules say we should, because essentially, until this Biden problem is settled, again, everything's in flux.
Mark, tell me again what you just said as we keep these live pictures up. Joe Biden about to come up. Julia, what are you watching for?
Look, watching for yet more reassurance from the president in a campaign environment that he can hold his own. You know, he's going to be talking about what he's been talking about on the trail today, saying that he's okay, he's ready to take on the job. I'm also going to watch and see if he's going to take questions from the press, if he has any impromptu, unscripted moments. You know, the rally is one thing. The rally is scripted, though. Right. So it's it's not the unexpected moments that we're really looking out for.
And I think, too, what I'm hearing from a lot of folks is, I think there's some reporting on this, that he may really highlight Project 2025 at this rally. And so I think that it is a smart pivot for the president to move this narrative back to Donald Trump and the extreme conservative agenda that he wants to implement if he's president.
Okay, there was a moment on social media this week that I think sort of encompasses what this is going to come down to. The president tweeted out Google Project 2025, and the Trump campaign responded to that saying Google Joe Biden dementia. And I think that's what we're going to hear from both sides, right? Like, but the Democrats are going to say Project 2025. Republicans are going to say he's not with it.
But Blake, Joe Biden's problem in Michigan isn't medical. It's political and electoral. And his problem is very simple. The EV mandate is crushed the auto industry. Inflation is killing. Inflation is killing. Look, there's a reason why Donald Trump's been leading in Michigan literally since October.
Electronic vehicles are not the reason.
It is a big problem. The UAW struck. That's not true. Okay, basically, Joe Biden's policies are crushing the forgotten men and women of this country, and that is why Donald Trump is encroaching on the blue wall that he lost in 2020.
So I asked Scott Traynor from Decision Desk HQ today. I said, Scott, if Joe Biden loses Michigan, what are DDHQ has a model that predicts the percentage of winning. I said, Scott, if Joe Biden loses Michigan, what does the DDHQ model say that he has a chance of winning that state? And Scott Kelly told me, if he loses Michigan, it's 10%, no matter what happens elsewhere.
And look, I've been to the auto manufacturing facilities in Detroit with a group of members of Congress, and the CHIPS Act.
Okay, but what you were saying was true.
I know you want to get back to Florida this, but Kelly, real quick, because I just want to set the stage for Trump, or for Joe Biden, rather, that how critical this one state is. And then we can get to the policies, but how critical this one state is for Joe Biden.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, too, in telling Gretchen Whitmer isn't there today with him. There's also this question around the UAW support, as there is reporting that they are growing concerned about potentially Biden not being able to beat Trump. So we're kind of looking into that right now as well. But I was also talking with a congressman who was on the flight on AF1, so he was supportive of the president.
What did he tell you?
But he said, the president came over, made time to talk with me. He said he was upbeat, in a good mood, and that he is committed to, quote, finishing the job is what he told him. So they're feeling,
You got your shot in, Ford? I'll let Brad finish here on the UAW.
No, the Teamsters are speaking at the RNC. Well, this is not just the UAW.
I'll give Brad the last word here.
Teamsters are traditionally more conservative among the union movement. Among labor unions, the problem is a cultural disconnect. It's not really based on policy. You have this disconnect among a lot of blue-collar workers who are more socially conservative compared to the union leadership in D.C., which is solidly Democrat. We've got to figure out how to relate to those voters. If not, we're going to lose some union workers, but it's not due to electric vehicles. That's what's saving
Donald Trump could be talking about unions at the RNC, trust me.
It is the big story right now in this country, as President Biden gave that hour-long press conference last night. He is set to talk any moment in the great state of Michigan, and you will watch it with us live here on the Hill, on the other side of the break.
This week on a special edition of The Hill Sunday, guest host Leland Vittert looks ahead to one of the biggest weeks in American politics, the Republican National Convention. The best political team anywhere gets you ready for the action, live from inside the Convention Center, Sunday at 10/9 Central on NewsNation.
Detroit, Michigan. You can see there on the right side of the screen as we await President Biden, it says Motown is Joetown. But the question now for the president, as it's been, is can he stop the momentum of Democrats who have come out and called for him to step aside? Or can he keep the momentum going and assure Democrats, enough of them at least, and donors that he deserves to be the Democratic nominee for president going forward? When we look at the state of Michigan right now, why is Joe Biden there? This is the fourth time that he has been there this year. Donald Trump has been there 3 times this year. It's because when you look at the polling right now, according to our DDHQ average, right now, President Biden at 46.9%, Donald Trump at 46.5%. Our DDHQ average gives the president, the incumbent, a 55% chance of winning that state as it stands right now. But if he were to lose that state, according to our DDHQ average, he only has a 10% chance of winning the presidency no matter what happens. Julia Manchester, Brad Howard, Ford O'Connell, Kelly Meyer, we sit here and we await the president. And what is so fascinating about this, Kelly, is, and Michael Starr Hopkins said this earlier this week, and I thought he was spot on. Mm-hmm. Joe Biden has to bat 1,000 from here on out. Can't hit 900, can't hit 500. He's got to bat 1,000 from here on out, and that's why every single one of these events going forward is going to be closely watched.
Exactly. Every move he makes is under the microscope. We saw that this week with him at NATO, him trying to come out there on Tuesday with strong remarks. As his team was saying at the White House, they were very proud of how the press conference went last night. Is very skilled on foreign policy. Now he's coming out here tonight. He'll obviously, as Julia mentioned, he'll have a teleprompter there. Yeah. I was at his rally in North Carolina. Was that last week? I don't know. We're losing track of days. I don't know. But I was at his rally in North Carolina, and he feeds off the energy. He has the teleprompter. He generally does a good job at rallies when he's on the road. But he has more travel coming up. He'll be at Rehoboth this weekend. He goes to Austin, Texas, has those remarks at LBJ Museum on Monday. Vegas, remarks 2 days there next week. So they're really trying to put him out there. But a lot of these are scripted events.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to the events and the scripted nature of it and the risk of them putting him out there, look at just yesterday, before the press conference. He, on stage, mixed up Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin, quickly walked it back, made a joke of it. But an hour later, he mixed up Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. You know, I understand that the president was very substantive and went deep into his knowledge of foreign policy, but at the end of the day, that's not the stuff that's going to play well with voters. They're going to see those moments of him messing up, and that's why it's incredibly important for him to play.
So the reason why I'm looking at my phone, it's not because I don't want to hear what you have to say. I'm listening to everything you have to say. Washington Post editorial board just dropped a few minutes ago. Biden keeps denying his physical and political frailty. They go on to say, in short, Mr. Biden's mixed reviews prolong the Democratic Party's predicament, as evidenced by disparate statements from elected officials after the news conference. Basically, the Washington Post editorial board. And I'm not sure how much it matters at this point because we've all seen.
Well, wait a minute. Well, you're talking about replacing Biden, who literally I don't think can serve another 4 months, let alone another 4 years, with Kamala Harris, the lowest rated vice presidential in modern polling history. And here's the problem. Before this political earthquake happened at the debate, this is the price of groceries election. Right. Democrats had a huge problem just in terms of inflation and the border, which they decided that they were just going to ignore. And now it's coming back to us. Remember, the electoral map is expanding. I would argue that the DHQ is wrong because if Donald Trump wins Michigan, he's also going to win Pennsylvania. So therefore,
if he wins Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin,
because
it's a 98%.
If you take a protractor,
I think where I disagree with, I do think Ford's right about the policy concerns of voters in this election and how that's a whole different concern that a lot of House moderates are looking at the Biden campaign and wondering, we've got to address this concern, but now we're too busy dealing with this concern, so we can't really focus on what our constituents want to. Where I disagree, though, is the Democratic Party has a well-financed, strong structure in terms of GOTV, in terms of communities of color, that Republicans cannot emulate in time for the election.
But the map is expanding in Trump's favor.
There's, for those of you who are just joining us here on the Hill on NewsNation or listening to us on Sirius XM as we await the comments of the President of the United States live, Brad, I want to remind our audience here where we started, which was a report that you know of, which was, and you've confirmed for us, that earlier today, the president was on a phone call with Democratic lawmakers. Congressman Levin, who has called on the president to step aside, we know of is now at least the first lawmaker to tell the president to his face, you need to step aside, and explain to our audience how that call went haywire.
Well, yeah, there was a call between the president and members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and it was set up by the president's operation, and there was a very kind of scripted speech from the president in defense of why he should remain the nominee. They tossed the two questions that they had kind of prepared for, and they were about to end the call, and the president's like, no, let me take some questions, because members were throwing up their hands on the Zoom. The first question he took was from Congressman Levin. Obviously, that went kind of haywire. They weren't expecting him to say that to his face.
He told him on the call, call,
Correct.
Mr. President, you have to go.
Correct. And then he issued a statement afterwards. And as the president was responding, the operation started kind of getting concerned that more members may do the same. And of course, they're worried about a cascading effect, so they abruptly ended the call. Right. What I'm told by one source, when the president was mid-sentence. So it was a very kind of bizarre ending. I think a lot of members left that call kind of wondering, confusing. But what I think the White House is doing is real smart here in Detroit is you saw them start with the thing he's known for the most, which is foreign policy. They're now moving on to the thing the group that has the strongest support for him, and that at the moment is the Black Caucus. And that's what you're starting to see in Detroit, where there's a strong union and Black population.
All right, so we do expect the president here at any moment. Other side of the break, Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, joins us as we await on this day, as we will in the weeks forward, the comments from the President of the United States. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on News Nation as we are just moments away from President Biden's campaign event in Detroit, Michigan. Live look there in the Wolverine State. Host of On Balance, Leland Vittert. Hello, hello. The president made some comments at a smaller, lower key profile event.
Off the record event, shows up at a restaurant.
Exactly.
Shake some hands.
Yep, glad handing, shaking hands, etc. But this is going to be the one that is, look, all of these are going to be watched now on because he cannot make a single medium-sized to massive mistake.
Even small mistakes, what people looked past a couple of years ago. I mean, remember, this is a guy who talked about having conversations with dead heads of state of other countries and getting the countries wrong. That each one of those are going to be magnified. Bigly is, I think that's a Chris Steyerwalt term.
Is the term?
Is the term. I think what's most interesting about this picture is who isn't there. Gretchen Whitmer, the governor, now she just tweeted support, but tweeting support's a lot different than showing up at the rally.
If they
the sitting senator, the senator who is the Democrat who is running for the open Senate seat, are all not there.
Gretchen Whitmer has a book tour, but if she really wanted to be there, she would really be there.
There may be a few people in that audience who'd want to buy books. I'm just going out on a limb here.
Right.
And I think it shows to you how perilous the support was. And look, Gretchen Whitmer was asked on Colbert a couple of days ago about full-throated support of Biden, and she looked at Stephen Colbert and goes, I like your tie.
I like your tie. What do you think about the debate performance? And she looked and goes, I like your tie. And look, that's part of the problem for these Democrats.
Yeah.
And even if, let's just operate in a world where Joe Biden stays in and wins, are they going to want to campaign alongside him in 2026, right? And that's part of the calculations, I think, for a lot of these folks as well.
Imagine the revenge tour if he
Oh, my gosh. So, as I said, to turn the show over to you, again, President Biden, I'm told he's in the overflow room for those
about
of you.
10 minutes.
That
right?
normally gives us, that's where you meet the high-end donors or the
You know
folks
what you should have been watching right now? What was scheduled? Trump's VP pick.